Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tech Tips Live. I'm going to take my time here. We still have a few people joining us. And one thing we've noticed is with all the remote work going on, sometimes WebEx takes a little bit for people to get their sound going. So just going to wait a little bit. We'd had a fair number of people pre-register. So I wanted to give them just a few more seconds to get here and get going. Again, throughout the presentation, if you have questions, you can go to the questions tab, hit the Q&A, and post it there. And we will, we may catch it during a presentation, or we will save those to the end when we get back to that. We also, this is being recorded like all of our Tech Tips Live, and we will post it to our website as well as to our YouTube channel here in a day or two. The June Tech Tips Live will end the first half of the year for us. We take July off. We're going to be looking at Python and get into some of the details of some more things that we're doing with Python, some of the Python commands, and as always, things that we learn and you all teach us along the way and pass along those tips to you. So look for that June 18th. And as always, too, we do appreciate your input and ideas for future Tech Tips Live. We'll be posting the subjects for the second half of the year here in a few weeks once we get this going. All right, let's go ahead and get going. You're hearing Phil now. I am your host here for today, and right now on the phone with me, I have Byron and Chris. They will be delivering some of our technical expertise as we talk about GainSeeker and ERP systems. There's more and more interest in companies using their technology stack more efficiently. And I showed this diagram last time, and we're going to be focusing here on how GainSeeker works with ERP and going through some of the use cases that people have already done. Maybe your company's using it, maybe you're just scratched the surface. I know some of you on the phone are already heavy users connecting GainSeeker with ERP. And so hopefully we want you to learn some things and have some ideas that you can apply to the way that you use GainSeeker. We have 4 topic areas we're going to go through here today. Byron will start out with the first couple, talking about ERP interfaces through time, talking about some of the use cases that we've seen. Then he and Chris will talk some about how we set up those exchanges and coordinating that, because a lot of the time the devil is in the details there. And then Chris is going to talk some more about how we use SOAP for once you've decided how we're going to exchange that data for testing that code, and also talk a little bit about some of the Python. So Byron, why don't you go ahead and get us started with ERP through the years.
All right, thanks, Phil. Hello, everyone. So yeah, we've gone a number of different routes over the years, different ways to interface to ERP systems. Flat files is one common way. Creating some temporary tables that maybe the ERP programmers push data out to these temp tables, and then we would read it. Also, we would write to these temp tables, and then the ERP people would either on a time basis or on a event-driven basis look and see data within those tables and pull the information in. There's been times where we've had read-only access to the ERP system. I mean, a lot of these systems have 40,000 tables in them, so they're more than a little concerned. They don't want us going in and messing anything up. So we have read-only access, which is fine in that case if we're reading bombs or batch numbers or schedule, that sort of thing. That's all we need to do is have a read-only access. There have been some cases where we had special executables that would run that would extract data and create a file as an example. And then more recently, we've done a number of projects with using SOAP and web services to talk to the ERP. And I just listed some of these off the top of my head that we've interfaced to over the years, Oracle, NetSuite, and Microsoft Dynamics, JDE, et cetera, et cetera. And so let's move on to the next slide. So, some of the use cases, and Chris can speak to these as well, is you might have a work order and you convert that into product information, specifications, set traceability because work orders running on a certain machine, certain shifts, certain batch or job numbers, that sort of thing. Another scenario with communicating with the ERP is validating the data. So an operator might scan a barcode for a job they're running, and then we could go to the ERP system and just validate that it's supposed to be running and all the information is correct there. One we've done a number of times is delivering a bill of materials to the shop floor, and we have a number of customers that will have the BOM delivered to the floor, and then as the operators are scanning in parts that they're using, it'll validate that they're putting the correct components into a finished part, so that they're not putting wrong size components in or wrong voltage or anything like that. So there's a validation step that occurs there. And then like an item or SKU number, just make sure that's correct based on the current work order and batch, that people are entering data under the correct identifiers. Chris, anything you want to add to that? He might be muted.
Yeah, so it was just taking me a minute to get unmuted, Byron, thanks. I think you covered things pretty well. We've done a lot of communication with ERP over the years. I would say the majority of it has been through either a read-only access into the tables or customized views. But this is pretty much correct. This is what we've done over the years.
All right. Moving on then. I think. Oh yeah. We also do some collection on the GainSeeker side, and then pass back to the ERP. Whether all the tests passed or not, and then along with that is our products ready to ship, and then that's useful in terms of inventory and knowing what's still WIP or work in process versus what's ready to be shipped out the door and be converted into cash. So that's always important. And then calculating metadata around that. And Chris, I think you had some thoughts on the metadata side of things.
Yes, as an example of this, so those of our customers who are in the food industry have to comply with the National Institutes of Standards and Technology rules on fair product delivery. In other words, that they need to make sure that they are providing as much product as they are claiming to in the labels and whatnot. But naturally, they don't want to give away product that they don't have to. Excuse me. So, GainSeeker can collect, for example, the product weights, but then if you're wanting to convert that into metadata where we can calculate the pounds of giveaway or even the cost of giveaway, then we typically need information that the users don't have, and we can get that information in some cases from the ERP system. So if we know under a certain work order number that they have shipped X many pounds of product, and that work order was for item XYZ, and we know that item XYZ costs so many dollars per pound, we can then take the weight data that we gathered in GainSeek and the production numbers and the cost numbers, and we can calculate things like how many pounds of product did they give away and how many dollars of product did they give away. So, that's what I'm meaning by metadata. It's additional information that was calculated from different sources of data from both the ERP system and GainSeeker.
Yeah, and that's useful to push back to the ERP system in a lot of cases so that the people doing the costing on those jobs in the future can see we typically run at, a couple percent over that we're giving away, and maybe they would factor that into the costing. All right, that's helpful. All right, let's move on to the next slide.
I would add there, Byron, that additionally, beyond getting that standard of well, our percent over is seeing it get decreased over time once they start measuring it. And we've had a number of foods clients who have been able to track significant savings as they've gotten that overpack value down.
Yes.
And millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's can be pretty impressive with high volumes how quickly that adds up in terms of the cost savings. So once you get into talking about the actual communication or coordination between GainSeeker and ERP, you have to answer a bunch of questions like what data are you actually going to exchange? Which tool are you going to use? We mentioned files and tables and views and executables and SOAP and all sorts of things. Which direction or directions? In other words, is it going to be a read-only, or would GainSeeker push information either to temp tables or directly to the ERP? And then if you're going with files and tables, finding a standard format that you're going to use to share the information, or in the case of SOAP, defining web service parameters and what all is going to happen. And typically with the web services, you're not going to have something that's already working right out of the box. You're probably going to have to write that on the ERP side, write something to deliver the information GainSeeker needs or to accept the information that GainSeeker is giving back. So there's some work there to be done in terms of defining what all is going back and forth. Chris, anything you want to add there?
No, that pretty much covers it.
All right.
I'd emphasize, Byron, oftentimes the need for work to be done on the ERP side. We tend to be a little lighter and more nimble participant in these projects, and I know sometimes we end up waiting for those other teams or other outside vendors to do some of that ERP work.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's often true. That we can do our side of it pretty quick, but sometimes there's a backlog or a queue that you have to get into for the ERP side to get that going. And Chris, why don't you take it away here with talking about SOAP UI? You've done more work on this than I have, I think.
Well, you might be being a bit generous there, but yes. SOAP is actually a protocol. It's basically a way to communicate with a web service, a standardized way of communicating with a web service. SOAP UI is actually a open source web application that allows you to test the web service that is using SOAP by basically saying, okay, I'm going to send this information up to the web service, and you have to specify, of course, what is the location of the web service, and sometimes you need to authenticate to the web service. But once all that's been taken care of, you can then say, I'm going to send this XML string to the web service, and then you can see what are you getting back from the web service. I think of this a lot as being similar to Hyperterminal when you're trying to test communications with a gauge via RS-232. This allows you to, without even GainSeeker in the loop, quickly and easily say, okay, if I send this command to the device, what response am I getting back? Or if I press that button on the gauge, what response am I getting back from the gauge through RS-232 protocols? So, the SOAP is actually just a standard protocol that exists that allows us to communicate with the web service. And the SOAP UI is an application that allows you to visually see and send strings to the ERP system, or the SOAP web service, the SOAP compliant web service, and to see the response back. So the SOAP UI is actually a very valuable tool when you're testing the web service and the communication through the web service to the ERP via the SOAP protocol. This is a screenshot of the SOAP UI, and as you can see, basically, you have the authentication down on the bottom. You have the string that we are sending up to the ERP system, or the web service that's in communication with the ERP system on the left. And on the right, you're seeing the response back from the ERP system, again, via the web service. So you can actually basically just easily test the system by saying, type in the values that you need for the parameters, and then you can hit send, and then you will see on the right-hand side the results back in an XML format. All right, if we go to the next screen, while that's very useful for testing the web service and making sure that you have the communication parameters that you need to use correct to get the response you're looking for back from the ERP system, this is the actual Python code that we are using in one scenario to communicate via the web service to the ERP system. And it's obviously a little bit more complicated than what we were doing on the previous screen. But once you write it once, it's basically you're just setting a few parameters, calling the code, and then getting the response back. And of course, error trapping, making sure that if the web service did not respond properly, that we trap that error so we can give at least as useful as possible error message back to the user, and making sure that we parse out all the results correctly and take care of all the scenarios. This is something that we have available. We can provide it to our customers if they want to start talking to their ERP systems via a SOAP compliant web service, or of course, if you would like, you can contract with us to do it. Now, that is, we would be getting GainSeeker to talk to the web service, not setting up the web service or the communication with the ERP. That is outside of our core competency.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, the error trapping is a really critical piece of this, because I know from experience we get some random errors occasionally, or the web service quits working for whatever reason on the other end, and we get some error messages back. So trying to capture what those error messages are and relay them back to the end user so that they can do some detective work or contact the ERP people and say, hey, the web service isn't responding, we're getting this error code or this kind of status message. That sort of thing is really helpful, especially in the early days of debugging and getting it going. Usually once it's going, it runs pretty seamless, but occasionally the web service will stop responding or something like that, and it's great to have some comprehensive error trapping in there so we know exactly what's going on.
Absolutely, that's true. There's a lot of moving parts in this. For example, the web, as you said, the web service could stop responding. That could be a problem on the IIS system or on the web server itself. There may be a problem between the web service and the ERP system. Authentication failures are not uncommon, especially, as you said, when we're working through the bugs. So, fortunately, Python has some very nice ways to help us trap for those errors.
Chris or Byron, would you guys want to comment a little bit on security and authentication? What are some tips that you might have for our users that are listening?
Well, one, which is probably going to be pretty obvious, most of these web services require some type of authentication, a username and a password. Naturally, you will want to set that up as what's known as a service account, because you don't want the system to fail every 3 months when the password expires and needs to be reset.
Yeah, I was going to mention what Chris just did. You want to use an account where the password isn't going to expire. You don't want it to croak every 3 months. Yeah, I mean, typically you've got some strongly encrypted passwords going back and forth, that sort of thing. So security usually isn't that big of an issue as long as you set it up right to begin with.
Okay, we ready to move on?
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We've got a few minutes here, about 8 minutes for questions. So again, if you go to in your user window, you should have the Q&A, and you can type us a question, and I will pose it here to Chris or Byron. You've got them live. If you want to put them on the spot, have some driving question. I know some of you, like I said, out there are pretty active users, so maybe there is maybe there's a prize if somebody stumps you guys or something today. While we wait here on a couple questions, I'm going to a couple things to let you know about. We talked about this last month. We have GainSeeker 932. We had a maintenance release, and that is available. So if you go to our website and go to request an update, and that is available there. The other thing I would ask is just a favor. If you have never reviewed GainSeeker, would you please consider going to Capterra and doing a review for us? And if you simply Google Capterra and GainSeeker, the first result will be a link to our listing there, and there's a write a review or make a review option there. And we would certainly appreciate that. We have excellent reviews at Capterra and have more than the vast majority of vendors in our slot. So we want to keep that going, and people like reviews, you know, whether it's your restaurant or software. So that would be something we'd really appreciate. So again, any questions?
Talking about 932 while we're waiting, see if there's any questions come in. That Python script archiving and versioning has saved my butt more than once on a recent project. It's just a great feature to have where you can go back and before you make some major changes, go ahead and save the current version, and then you can go back and quickly see what changes you've made since then. And something I was playing around with today, we've got bookmarks coming in 9.4, and so you can bookmark various functions within a script and even across multiple scripts. So if you're calling functions in other scripts, those bookmarks are really handy to be able to hop around to various places in code. So you're not scrolling all the time. You can just go directly to a couple key places that you're looking at the Python script.
Okay. All right. I've got a question here. Are there the ERPs you mentioned is not, or outside of ERP, I have an MES. Can we get some of that same information from an MES system? Would what you say today apply to other systems as well in general? To paraphrase a little bit.
Yeah, and we've interfaced to a number of MESs, manufacturing execution systems. Very similar. Sometimes with those, they're not as complex as an ERP, so we might hit tables directly or that sort of thing. But we've interfaced to a number of MESs just like the ERPs. Chris, anything to add on that?
No, not at all. From our point of view, it's basically the same thing. We're hitting another system that has information that we can use to either validate things or do additional calculations. And other things besides ERP systems and MES systems can be used.
Okay. So really the same rules, same ideas with data exchanges and all that applies again for a multitude of systems. ERP just kind of tends to be the biggest corporate-wide systems that we deal with.
Yeah, and I'm working on a project currently with an MES where I'm pulling schedule information and displaying that for the operator so they know which jobs are supposed to be running on which lines. So That's pretty straightforward stuff.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, I think with that, our next one, as I said, we have Python scripting tips and tricks coming up June 18th. We will be posting this recording a little bit later, probably later tomorrow or first thing on Monday. So please join us again in June. And thanks so much for joining us here for Tech Tips Live. Thanks, Byron, and thanks, Chris, for your input. We hope you all learned something new today or ways to use GainSeeker to its fullest. Thank you all for joining us.